And now we have Michael Larsen from Copenhagen, Denmark, and he will give us a very interesting talk on OCT and the optic disc and the value of digging deeper.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, organizers, again. It's been a wonderful conference, and the audience is great. So we're going to the theme for this talk was supposed to be the value of digging deeper. So we're going to look into the optic disc, and I'll draw on examples from the Copenhagen Child Cohort I study, and the results produced by my PhD student, Larsen. So adults with large optic disc drusen can have peripapillary retinal nerve fiber layer deficits and severe visual field defects. And such defects are rarely seen in children with optic disc drusen. So something happens between childhood and adulthood. And if you look at the epidemiology, you find out that disc drusen can be found in anything from 0.2 to 3.1% of adults, but only in 0.37% of children who have smaller and deeper optic disc drusen, suggesting that optic disc drusen is a feature that grows. So congestion of axonal flow in a narrow scleral canal is suspected of causing the formation of acellular optic disc drusen. They contain mitochondria, RNA, DNA, and so on, but they are debris from cellular destruction, probably nerve fiber destruction. And with slit lamp biomicroscopy, ultrasonography, and autofluorescence fundus photography, you can make the diagnosis of optic disc drusen if they are large, but OCT is also an attractive option, and it works in a non-mydriatic manner, a non-contact, and can demonstrate smaller and more deeply located optic disc drusen. So you see an example here of very large disc drusen associated with optic nerve head abnormalities and with visual field defects. But now we're going to see if enhanced depth OCT can do the job of finding smaller ones, and we have made preliminary tests to show that swept source OCT certainly also can do the job. First, I want to stress that the real advantage here of OCT in this and in many other contexts is that you can see differences between dead tissue on a histology slab and live tissue with authentic anatomy, as we see it here in a difference between OCT thickness in an eye that is about to be enucleated for an intractable iris iris melanoma, and after enucleation you only see half of the choroidal thickness that you see in vivo. So live tissue examination is great. Here are the percentages, approximately 50 on average between the three patients we saw. So the CCC 2000 and affiliated studies have found that the subfoveal choroid is 18% thicker in men than in women. Children who are taller and have entered puberty have thicker choroids. Children of low birth weight have thinner choroids at the age of 11 to 12 when we examined them last time. And longer and more myopic eyes have a thinner choroid, as also shown in other studies. And the mean subfoveal choroidal thickness in children of this age, 11 to 12 years, is 360 micrometers, with very large, almost tenfold individual variation. So the objective of this study was to examine optic disc drusen in children. And we had 1,406 children, aged 11 to 12, and we had gradable images and scans from all but 100 of them. Autofluorescence fundus photography was not applied because mydriatics were avoided to improve compliance and recruitment. Color photography was made. The prevalence is the main outcome, as we will see in a moment. First, here are some examples of how you can identify optic disc drusen on an OCT. As the text says, they are round and have a hyperreflective center and a thin hyperreflective margin. They are sometimes obscured by vessels because vessels cast a very big shadow if they have an oblique course across the image, because that throws off the reflection from the erythrocytes away from the line of inspection. And finally, deep in the optic nerve head, you can find hyperreflective bands as indicated by the yellow lines here, and they are believed to represent deep drusen. Here's an examination of how we measured the scleral canal from the edge of Brooks membrane to the edge of Brooks membrane on the other side. And then when you plot, okay, the first result is that 1% of the children have optic disc drusen. And then when you look at it in those 13 children, then 11 of them are in the lowest quartile of the optic canal, the scleral canal distribution. So the black dots represent children with optic disc drusen, and you see how they're distributed far to the left in the group of people with smaller scleral canals. So 1% was the prevalence, and all but one in the lower scleral canal quartile. Children with drusen had a mean disc diameter of 1,339 micrometers. Those without drusen, 1,508. There were no differences in age, birth weight, refractive error, or Tanner puberty stage. So in conclusion, in this cross-sectional study of a cohort of healthy children, optic disc drusen were found overwhelmingly in eyes with a narrow scleral canal. And this is consistent with the proposition that optic disc drusen arise as a consequence of nerve fiber congestion in a narrow scleral canal. So this was just one example of how you can dig deeper and find more answers in the optic nerve head, as we have also seen it in the other presentations. Thank you.